So American reporters still believe that there should be a clear distinction between facts that are used in neutral reporting on events and feelings, subjective feelings about a particular issue that reporters argue have no place in a report or a story. Reporters and journalists committed to this idea of journalistic objectivity argue that their report, their story, should be confined to a list of verifiable facts about a particular story, like facts about how many people are unemployed, how many people have health insurance, how many acts of violence have there been. That reporters argue that there's really no place in the story for the journalist to say how they feel about those facts or about what's going on in society. As we've said earlier, there's a real question about whether or not reporters can indeed separate subjective interpretation and feelings from the stories that they cover. But regardless of that, what's been interesting with the development of cable channels like Fox and MSNBC is that these more conventional reporters and journalists for TV news organizations that have this commitment to the ideal of objectivity have increasingly come into various kinds of conflict with the hosts of these cable news channels that increasingly focus more on opinion and commentary than straight news. All right, that when you're watching the Fox News channel, you've got Bill O'Reilly giving his very subjective rant about illegal immigrants. All right, or if you watch Rachel Maddow, all right, her show on MSNBC will focus on how there are potential cuts to Social Security that she might really disagree with, right, and really object to. What's really interesting is that Bill O'Reilly and Rachel Maddow, who are essentially talk show hosts of programs that focus on commentary and opinion, both of those shows will feature guests that are reporters and journalists for their respective networks. So Bill O'Reilly might have a segment with a Fox News reporter. Rachel Maddow might have a featured segment with a reporter from NBC News. And what's interesting is you have like this culture clash where the journalists are trying to maintain their commitment to objectivity while the talk show hosts are expressing their own subjective views. And so you get a really interesting mix-up here where a lot of times Rachel Maddow or Bill O'Reilly might try to prod the journalist into supporting their view and agreeing with them, and then the reporter will kind of back off and just try to stick to the facts. So really interesting kind of mashup here between opinion and traditional reporting on these cable news channels. This slide also raises, I think, a really interesting question about the relationship between journalists and reporters and their interview subjects, particularly in government. All right. A lot of times, reporters are doing stories related to government. All right, reporters cover stories on local, city, state, and federal government, and those stories will feature lots of interviews with government officials. Well, I think a source of controversy is and debate is what is the appropriate relationship between the reporter and his or her subject. Should it be more adversarial in nature? Should it be more cooperative and collaborative? Now, some some critics argue that American reporters are much too adversarial towards their subjects. That reporters practice what's derided as gotcha journalism, where reporters try to catch the government official that they're interviewing in some kind of mistake or misstatement, and then nail them to the wall for that. Some have argued that that adversarial approach to their subjects in government has really turned off the American public and made Americans very cynical about journalists. Now, on the other hand, other critics argue that the American press, that American journalists are too close to their subjects, that they cozy up to them and are insufficiently critical of them. Here, the argument is that a lot of times journalists are simply stenographers for those in power, that journalists simply, write down what the government representative says, what the press official has to say, and then just regurgitates that party line in his or her story. Here, the argument is that journalists need to be more critical, more skeptical of what their subjects are saying. And actually, some critics argue that one reason we got into the Iraq War over the past decade was because journalists were insufficiently critical of what government officials were saying about why we should go to war with Iraq. I mean, you might recall that the infamous example of weapons of mass destruction, that the Bush administration was saying that, we've got to go to war with Iraq because Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction. We think he was somehow involved with the 9/11 attacks and so on and so forth. Some critics argued that a lot of American journalists just took the Bush administration at its word and assumed that, the government is saying there's weapons of mass destruction, so I guess it must be true. And that we went to war with Iraq in part because of the claim that Iraq had all these dangerous weapons that were going to be a threat to the safety of Americans and so on. And then, after we've been at war for all these years, whoops, looks like there weren't any weapons of mass destruction. Looks like Saddam Hussein didn't really have anything to do with 9/11. And then you had all these apologies from like the New York Times and other news organizations. So here, the argument is that some critics argue that journalists need to be a little bit more adversarial when it comes to covering their subjects and not just accept everything they say at face value. So, what do you think about this? What do you think is the appropriate relationship between journalists and their sources like government officials? Should they be really adversarial, critical, skeptical of what they say, or should they cooperate and collaborate for the common good?